In the US, as I've mentioned before, many cities operate on a grid system, meaning that streets are stacked next to one another in rectangular blocks, hence the term blocks. One of the earliest examples of this in the United States occurred in Philadelphia. But don't take my word for it, instead listen to me from 6 months ago.
Wait, sorry, but I never understood this thing with the blocks 10 blocks away or something. I was like, what are they even talking about? But now this makes a lot of sense, my friends. For ways British and American streets are very different. My friends, I really wonder what those differences are. But before I go into that, let me ask you for one thing. If you can leave a like, thank you so much. It's the best way to show support. If you can subscribe, well, in that case, forget about it. You make my day. Have that in consideration now. Link for the original video in my description and let's play it.
Hello, I'm Lawrence and I'm on a quest to
Lawrence.
uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond.
I
And
know.
one of those memos pertains to streets.
What?
Streets are the bread and butter of our communities. Not literally, that would be disgusting. Streets are where we as humans first experience independence, where we each rode our BMXs until sundown. At least that's what I did in the 80s. But after
No, but jokes aside, I end up playing a lot in the streets.
leaving Britain for America 14 years ago, I realised that streets on either side of the pond are very different.
Also-
Not only does this apply to the houses on the street, something I covered in a previous video, but the streets themselves.
Wait, my friends, the houses, I can see it. But the streets themselves, what?
Now, there are various definitions of the word street, but for the purposes of
I
this
need
video,
examples.
I'll be defining street as a road that is continuously flanked by buildings, usually residential. And so,
Okay.
without further ado, here are 4 ways that British and American streets are very different.
Let's see it.
Instinctively,
Lente.
I always thought that American streets were probably longer than their British counterparts.
100% they are. I will not believe this video if Lawrence tries to convince us that UK or European streets are bigger than American. I don't believe it.
And it's easy to make this assumption for a reason that we'll get to later in this list. But now that I've lived in the US for a while, it's difficult to say whether the average American street is longer than the average British street.
Sorry, but Indianapolis is looking kinda beautiful. André, that's completely out of the topic of the video. I know, but wow.
In fact, it was quite hard to find any reliable data on this on the internet. And so whenever that happens on my channel, I do what Billy Joel does. I go to extremes. What do I mean by that?
Okay.
Well, we can take a look at some of the most extreme cases of street length in both Britain and America. Now, this isn't easy to do either, because people have different definitions on what constitutes the longest continuous residential street. My definition of a street that I outlined at the beginning of this video rules out the near 300-mile Watling Street in the UK, since this otherwise impressive old Roman road isn't continuously flanked by buildings. And so by this
Okay.
definition, the longest continuous residential street in the UK is reportedly King Street in Aberdeen, Scotland, which measures in at just over 2 miles in length. In the US,
Oh, that's nothing. That's nothing. I bet in America there is like one that is 20 miles, trust me.
there are several streets that have laid claim to the longest. Chief among these is Colfax Avenue in Colorado. But as with Watling Street, it isn't continuously flanked by buildings. And so
No, my friends, I have a guilty, I will confess a guilty pleasure. Every time I react to UK stuff versus American stuff, I'm always on the American side. So, and it gives me joy. But you are European. Yeah, but the UK is different region.
So after that, it is sort of hard to determine which is America's longest continuous street. So I'll just give you an example that's local to me. Western Avenue, right here in Chicago, runs from the north of the city to the south at a total length of just over 27 miles. So when it
Holy 27!
comes to extreme cases of long streets, America certainly wins. And the following might be a good reason for that. In the past
Layout.
on this channel, I've talked about how the layout of British cities is long and winding, and how American streets are straight, organised and rectangular. But this is just a generalisation, and often there are city plans that can buck the trend. In the UK,
You know what, my friends? This is what I really believe. I think American overall is better built than Europe because it's younger. You know what I mean? We have a lot of old stuff here, that does not make sense anymore. This is my perspective. Of course, other Europeans may disagree, but you guys end up making things correct because you guys had more knowledge, when America was built, because Europe was, quite older comparing with America.
UK streets of the post-industrial revolution do tend to be better organized.
Actually, let's run this one back, sorry.
Rectangular. But this is just a generalization, and often there are city plans that can buck the trend. In the UK, streets of the post-industrial revolution do tend to be better organised and, dare I say it, block-like
because
due
they
to
are
better
newer.
planning. But in ancient British times, less consideration was given to functional navigation and fire safety. Also, old British roads were often built on existing trade routes, and their bendiness is a result of having to circumvent obstacles in the days before advanced machinery. In the US, as I've mentioned before, many cities operate on a grid system, meaning that streets are stacked next to one another in rectangular blocks, hence the term blocks. One of the earliest examples of this in the United States occurred in Philadelphia. But don't take my word for it, instead listen to me from 6 months ago.
Wait, sorry, but I never understood this thing with the blocks 10 blocks away or something. I was like, what are they even talking about? But now this makes a lot of sense, my friends.
In 1682, the city was planned and developed by the English Quaker William Penn, who also founded the entire Pennsylvania colony and for whose father the state was named. He decided to make Philadelphia one of the first American cities to operate on a grid system, for the very reason that he frowned upon the disorderly layout of his home city of London. I suppose I owe him a debt of gratitude, because even despite the 100-degree temperatures, Philadelphia was easily one of the most navigable cities I've had the pleasure of traversing on foot. Now, not only does America's...
Actually, I reacted to Philadelphia the other day, and my friends, it's a beautiful, beautiful state.
Grid system lend itself to...
Actually, Philadelphia is not a state, right? Pennsylvania is the state of Philadelphia, but the state is beautiful and the city is also beautiful.
Potentially longer streets, but also to bigger house numbers. And you might be thinking, ooh, Captain Obvious. If America has longer streets, of course its house numbers go higher. But much to my own surprise, street length actually has little to do with the fact that American addresses sometimes go into the 4 or 5 digits. Let's take a look at why that is. Back in the UK, we're often flabbergasted by the fact that Americans might live at an address in, say, the 6000s. And that's because in the UK, it's actually quite rare for house numbers to be anything more than 3 digits. Why is that?
Honestly, even three digits is pushing. 2 is normal. How many houses did I already add, since I end up living with my wife? 3 or 4? 3. And all of them are 2 digits. That's it.
Well, it's because our numbering system goes like this. On any given street, the street numbering will usually start at the number 1, and the numbers move up sequentially with the odd numbers on one side of the street and the even numbers on the other. So if a street has fewer than 1,000 houses, as is often the case, a 4-digit address won't exist. When such addresses do occur in the UK, they really stand out. Reportedly, the highest numbered address in the UK is 2679. In the US, an address number of that size, or even way higher, can be found almost everywhere, to the extent that I've personally lived at 5 different American addresses with a number higher than that. So why are US house numbers so big? Well, in America, house numbers on a given street don't usually start at 1. What often happens in an American city is that you have a 0 point, which is the city centre. And for every mile that you get away from that 0 point, 1,000 is added to the surrounding addresses. So, for example, if you live, say, 4 miles away from the city centre, there's a good chance that your address will be in the 4,000s. Now,
okay, this actually makes a lot of sense. Oh, wow. Well, I'm actually glad that I'm watching this video, because that numbering stuff on the doors I never understood. Wait, so many houses here, but this makes a lot of sense.
Now, this isn't the case everywhere, but in general, that's how things are done. That's why some of the big skyscrapers in the city centre have an address number that's lower than 1,000, because they're right there in and around the 0 point. But so much for numbering conventions. What about naming conventions? In other words, are there any striking differences between how Britain and America name their streets? And the
Street
short
names.
answer is yes. You know, when I first moved to the US, there was something I couldn't quite put my finger on that struck me as unusual about all of the street names that I was encountering. And it was only recently, after I sat down with a list of the most popular street names in either country, that I realised some of the major differences in how our two countries name their streets. So, to give us an understanding of what these differences are, I looked up the 10 most commonly named street names in both Britain and America.
Okay.
And what I found next was truly shocking for people that are easily moved by words. In Britain, the 10 most commonly found street names are Manor Road, Green Lane, Victoria Road, London Road, Church Street, Church Road, Park Road, Main Street, Station Road, and High Street.
Okay, kind of standard, I would say. Man, I don't know. I'm curious to see the American one.
So with churches, manors and stations, we apparently like to name streets after types of buildings.
Yeah.
In Victoria Road, we have evidence that Britain also likes to name its streets after famous British historical figures.
By the way, if I had to do the translation to my country, to my language in this case, it will be similar to the way that the UK does it.
To me, none of those are the biggest revelation on this list. That is reserved for entry number 1, but more specifically, entry number 3. You see, it's often observed that Brits say High Street and Americans say Main Street to describe a city's primary business street. And of course, these names are also loosely considered to be...
Wait, but Main Street makes more sense. Is the main street, you know? The main. You know what I mean?
Each country's most commonly named streets. And sure enough, as you can see in the UK, High Street wins the gold medal. What I was surprised to see was a respectable bronze around the neck of Main Street. These are all Olympic metaphors. Now, whichever way you slice it, things are completely and utterly a little bit different.
Wait, Main Street may be number 1 in America then.
With America's top 10. In 10th is 7th. Are you confused? Well, due to the American grid system, an awful lot of American streets are not just named, they're numbered. Next is Oak, then 6th, then Main, down in 7th place.
Main.
Then 5th, then Park, 4th, 1st, 3rd, and 2nd. And the
Wait. My friends, what is going on here? Street second. What?
and 2nd. And the first thing that stood out
This is actually fascinating.
to me about this top 10 is that 1st is 3rd, 3rd is 2nd, and 2nd is 1st. And as a lot of my followers on Twitter rightly pointed out, 1st is not 1st because 1st sometimes goes by the name of Maine. I'm glad I gave up drinking. So that's it, we've solved it. The chief difference is Britain likes to name its streets after historic royals, buildings, and green spaces, and America after an elite group of integers. But what if we took away America's numbered streets? What would its top 10 be made of then? Well, the answer is Lake, Washington, View, Elm, Cedar, Maple, Pine, Oak, Maine in at number 2.
Why is Oak appearing always so well positioned?
And Park. So in this case, just like with Britain, we have a historical figure in the name of Washington, backing up my observation that a lot of streets in this country are in fact named for US presidents. But the big revelation to somebody that's never spent a day in America is that America really likes to name its streets after trees. And I can only think that's because
Well, I will not dox myself for logic reasons, but the street where I live, the name is actually of a tree. Is this a sign that I may should move to America?
the word street
Maybe.
includes the word tree, or because trees are everywhere. That's it for this episode.
Well.
Let me know in the comments below if you've ever lived at any one of these street names. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can have these kind of discussions with me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS. And
Thank
don't
you, my
forget to
friend.
subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. Finally,
Okay, feel free to show him all the support. Lawrence is tremendous, and I really appreciate all of his work. But that said, well, this was a really cool one, my friends. I low-key end up learning a lot on this. I was like, when I saw the title, I was like, I'm not even sure what Lawrence is going to talk about this one. But damn, this was really interesting. This street, for example, this numbering stuff makes a lot of sense now. The street name is also very interesting. The grid system is also interesting. Like I said, I really believe overall America is better built than Europe. Probably if you like history, maybe Europe is a bit better because we since our stuff is older, there is also the positive side on that if you love history. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this with me, my friends. Really means a lot, you guys, and staying until the end. See you guys in the next one. By the way, I have an Instagram account, link below this video, so drop me a follow there. But yeah, see you guys in the next one. Bye, my friends.